Good morning, everyone, and welcome to our Conscious Capitalism Rochester August meeting today. We're really excited to share about building culture virtually. It was definitely a topic that there was a lot of registrations rolling in, a lot of people really interested in hearing about some of these best practices, and we can certainly make time for a lot of audience questions. So the plan is to spend about 45 minutes kind of talking as a panel. But feel free as we're going to shoot any of your questions into the Q&A, and we'll spend at least a half an hour at the end really getting into some of those questions as well. For those that have never been to a Conscious Capitalism Rochester meeting before, Conscious Capitalism is based on four key tenets. It was started by Raj Sisodia. He wrote a book called Firms of Endearment back in 2007 and started this whole movement. And it really keyed in on these four tenets of what came to be known as conscious capitalism. First, that they have a higher purpose beyond just making profits. You know, you need profits to survive. You got to keep the lights on, but the purpose of the company can and maybe even should go beyond that. They also have a stakeholder orientation. So rather than prioritizing the stockholders, it's how do we balance the needs of the customers, the community, the employees, the environment, really this entire ecosystem that surrounds and supports the community. Additionally, there is a conscious leadership. So leaders have to grow for the organization to grow. They're servant leaders. They empower their folks. And finally, those leaders are trying to create a conscious culture. And that's really what we're going to spend a lot of our time talking about today. Really, how do you focus on prioritizing the well-being of your employees, their growth, their engagement, and ultimately what conscious capitalism, has found is that these companies actually, in the long run, they end up making more money too. There's nothing wrong with that, and oftentimes, the ways that customers, more and more customers want to be conscious of the way that they're spending their money. More and more employees want to be conscious of the ways that they're, what types of companies that they want to work for. And so it really becomes a self-reinforcing system. And that's really what we wanted to talk about today, because we have three folks here with us today, Kim Allen from Dixon Schwabl, Brian Bihl from Paylocity, and Sean Flaherty from ITX, all of which are companies that have long focused on culture. And in the case of Dixon, Schwabl, and ITX, had to make a little bit of a pivot to figure out what that looks like in this virtual environment. And then in the case of Paylocity, has for the most part been virtual for quite a while, and we can learn a little bit about some of those best practices and what, if anything, changed given the pandemic in their company as well. So without further ado, I just wanted to jump right into it, and I think we're going to start. I guess we'll start with Kim Allen. So actually, how dare I forget to thank all of our sponsors. So thanks to our visionary partners at Accelerate, Cleancraft, and the Bonadillo Group, and to our sustaining partners at Benefit Link, Home Leasing, Nazareth College, SWBR, 2 Point Capital Management, Grit Health, and very newly also now the Monroe County Library System. So thanks to all of them, and we really couldn't do it without all of you. And now we are excited to jump right into our program for the day. So I will start with Kim Allen, who is a graduate of Ithaca College with a BS in Communications. Kim began her career in public relations in 1996 as an administrative assistant at Eric Mower and Associates. She joined Dixon Schwabl in 2001, taking on the role of managing partner in 2010. In her current role, Kim serves as the go-to for counsel and execution of all client crises and issues management needs. She serves as the spokesperson for the firm in absence of CEO Lauren Dixon and President Mike Schwabl, and plays a crucial role within the agency, providing overall strategy for agency growth and development. Kim is also the incoming CEO for Dixon Schwabl, so we're really excited to have her today. And Kim is a mom of 2 young children, her daughter Norin, 12, and son Simon, also 12. She resides in Victor and with her kids and her husband. And her husband, Josh Allen, is not the Buffalo Bills quarterback. She wants to make sure all of you know. So sorry for any disappointment there. Kim, thanks so much for joining us today.
Thanks for having me.
So as many in Rochester will know, Dixon Schwabl has long been focused on culture and how to build culture, and has been recognized as a great place to work for many years. Lauren has certainly been a champion of that whole organization for quite a long time. So I'm just curious, tell us a little bit about what it was like in March when you had to shut down and kind of where things stand and how you tried to pivot.
Yeah, one word for it was scary. It was really scary. There was so much unknown. There was so much information coming that was fragmented. We started really paying attention very early in March. And I remember we all, as a smaller portion of our leadership team, got together to start to strategize, what does it look like if we have to shut down? So having a little bit of foresight and seeing what was coming across the West Coast or starting in the West Coast and could possibly make its way here, reading about what was happening overseas, we decided just to get our thinking ahead of the game. So looking at technology, the majority of our folks are laptop enabled, so they're mobile. We do have folks that work in other parts of the country, so we were most of the way there. We do have, though, 20 professionals who are still docked to desktop stations, and those are more on our production and creative side of things where they need a lot of powerful equipment. We're slowly transitioning them, but we hadn't gotten there yet. However, we were Microsoft 365 enabled. We were interconnected, so there were lots of good reasons why we should be able to flip the switch pretty quickly, but we did have to do some thinking about it. So we got ahead of the game, and then just kind of sat and wait. And we got ahead of the communications game too. We talked to our employees about what our in the office. Could they travel? If they traveled, what did they need to do? This was all happening, I want to say, between March 6th and 10th. So we were just a little bit ahead of when the schools shut down. And then we also sent the communications out to clients. So making sure that those were aligned. So employees knew what to expect of their behaviors at work. And then our clients knew how our employees were going to be behaving at work. So that alignment was really key for us. And then as soon as the school systems decided to close, which happened on a Saturday, if you all remember, that Friday before, we told everybody, take your equipment home just in case, be prepared to not come into work on Monday. We didn't think they wouldn't be at work on Monday for 6 months, but we got them all home, and we made an announcement on Sunday morning that we would not be opening and to stay tuned for future communications. And that's how we made it work.
And yeah, I remember many of us were in the mindset of, maybe this will be a couple weeks, maybe a month, and little did we know everything that was coming. So I think in the first couple of weeks, people were just trying to survive. But how did then, as it started to become more clear that this was going to be a longer term thing, how did you all pivot? What did your typical week, like, how did you start to change into, really being a remote workforce for the foreseeable future?
We started instantly with all leadership met at 8 o'clock every single day. And so we had our finger on the pulse of the organization. People on the leadership team tend to represent every facet of our organization, as they do in most companies. So we had a good finger on the pulse of how's your team doing? What are you hearing? And then we made the decision that first week to do weekly check-in calls. So the entire leadership team split up our 100-person employee list, and we made weekly phone calls to the team to just check in. How are things going? How are you feeling? What do you need? Do you have your equipment? Making arrangements for people to come get that second monitor. Can you water my plants? Just silly things that you didn't even think about. So, and then making sure technology was working. We had to expand our broadband a little bit and getting that in place. That took a week, but we had VPN. We were able to get everybody into any files that they needed in the office remotely, so that wasn't a problem. So just kind of working out kinks and identifying places that we may have missed in that pre-planning session from a couple weeks prior. But for the most part, the real big focus was on the people. Are you comfortable? Do you have what you need? Are you safe? Do you feel safe? We did an employee survey pretty early on to get a temperature check, and then another one later. And it was interesting to see the shift go from exactly what you said, that disorientation of, I'm working from home. How's this going to work? How long am I going to be here? Do I have everything I need? To, this is kind of a bummer. I miss my people. I feel weird locked in my house all day. I can't get outside. I can't go to a restaurant. And so you saw the mental health shift start to happen, and finding ways to help connect with people in that way and make sure that they were taken care of that way too. So there's been an evolution, and I don't think our trajectory has been any different from anybody else.
Now, has there been anything along the way that surprised you, despite the best intentions and planning, that's something that surprised you along the way in terms of the shift?
100% productivity. We had no idea that we could be this productive with 100% of our workforce not in the office. And that has been a pleasant surprise. I know, we're a smaller business, regionally focused, and I know larger companies are used to a remote workforce all the time. In the service industry, and specifically in marketing, that's really scary. When you have a creative product where it's important for people to be collaborating and sharing energy and creative thinking and designing concepts for large campaigns, you worry, can that kind of energy be replicated when you're not all together? And quite honestly, I think we've done some of our best work in these last 6 months. So that was the big surprise, is we are just as productive as when we were in the office together.
Yeah, no, I've read a few things that Lauren has written in the RBJ, kind of surprised as well about how well it was able to kind of translate to the virtual environment. But has there been anything, specifically? I know that you can't install. For those who don't know, there's a slide at their office. So I know you can't install one of those in everybody's homes. But what other ways have you tried to bring that that Dixon Schwabl feel and culture into your kind of everyday in a virtual environment?
Well, you mentioned early on in your introduction that culture has always sort of been the foundation of this organization. So we knew early on that was something that might suffer if we were apart. So we put an intentional focus on that right out of the gate and got a small team together. We had 2 teams that we formed instantly. One was a team focused on how can we keep culture alive, and the other was a team that we called Other Side Planning. Knowing that the world was going to change, our world was going to change, what were some things that we can do to think futuristically about our business and how we're going to need to serve. So the team that was focused on culture started brainstorming.
Did we lose Kim? Or is that me?
Missions from brewing beer, home brewing beer, to pottery, crafting, and they end up being how-tos. Justin Shaw on our team just released a video of MTV Cribs. If you're as old as I am, you know what that show is.
Sure.
It's an MTV Cribs style video, a tour of his 100 and some odd year home in Canandaigua. And then we had this really great video that was just released. We have a slam poet on our team. His name's Marquis Burton, and he had written some work around the Black Lives Movement matter that he was inspired and sat down and wrote a few pieces of poetry, and we decided to use one of his pieces titled Home under a track of 15-second snippets of our team's weekend. We put it out on Thursday. We said, everybody send us 15 seconds of your weekend. Just show us what you're doing this weekend, 15 seconds only. Those flooded in. We put it under Marquis's poem and released it, and it was just this, it's the most amazing piece of art, just sort of patched together, of what it's like to be the people who work for us. So that stuff feels like Dixon Schwabl, and it was sort of this brilliant way that the team came up with to keep us connected.
Great. Thanks so much, Kim. Well, I want to turn it over now to Sean, I think, and talk a little bit about kind of similarly what the trajectory was like at ITX. So very briefly, Sean Flaherty started innovating with software products back at 11 years old on his 8-bit Commodore VIC-20 in the 80s and never stopped. He studied aviation electronics working on F-14 Tomcats in the Navy, molecular genetics at the University of Rochester, and earned an MBA from the Simon School of Business in 2006. Most of his experience, however, has come from working in the trenches with his amazing clients, building innovative software products that move, touch, and inspire the world for over 2 decades. He is most fortunate to have the privilege of leading the team that is ITX. ITX has built a passionate group of inspired technologists and artists that produce magic every day for their clients. ITX is pioneering the way that software products are built and creating best practices that forging the way software products are built. Sean teaches MBAs at the Simon School of Business and speaks to leadership teams around the world on innovation, culture, empathy, and the momentum framework. His work has led to him earning recognition and accolades such as the 2019 Vistage New Speaker of the Year and Trust Across America Top Thought Leader and Trust Awards. Thanks so much for joining us today, Sean.
Thanks, Andrew. Appreciate that.
So I know that you and I have spoke quite a bit, and I know also that ITX has also been recognized, as a top workplace many times. And so I know that culture has been a focus for you all, but for those that aren't as familiar with ITX, tell us a little bit just about what your organization looked like, at maybe at the beginning of March, and what that transition looked like as all of this became clear that we were going to have to go virtual.
Well, as you know, we just moved our headquarters downtown. So we moved into the Metropolitan Tower, the 9th floor of the Metro. And I had a lot of excitement. It was a new space for us. We had the opportunity to completely start from scratch and build a beautiful space. And there was a lot of energy. It was very strange to all of a sudden just have to turn off the lights and go home. Now, fortunately, we're a company that moves bits and bytes around and pixels, around the screen. And similar to Dixon in that case, it was pretty easy for us to just have everybody stay home. That wasn't a problem. But it's the cultural aspects that have become, the top of mind and the thing that we're focusing on for leadership. It's been interesting. I agree with Kim in terms of, everything she said. You guys are doing some phenomenal stuff, Kim. So that was a great story you had to tell. Very impressed. I think our productivity has been good, if not better than it was before. I'm not really seeing any issues there. I think our people are struggling a little bit in terms of the folks that are here in Rochester since we also have offices in Cincinnati and Tulsa, and I think those folks are struggling a little bit with missing their teammates and their colleagues. We've done a lot of things similar. We've done some happy hour. We do a lot of happy hours, virtual happy hours, and social get-togethers. And I just came up with this thing we're going to try to do a work from work day. The office has been open. People can come back in, but it's completely up to them. We've given them the choice, but they're choosing not to. And I understand why. They've settled into a new routine, and a lot of them have children at home and they have responsibilities, and I get that. So we're trying to find some unique ways to have them come back together and get that in-office experience back a little bit. Because I think we're missing that. We're missing that social interaction and the friendships. And, it's harder. It's much harder through a screen than it is when you're face to face.
Absolutely. Yeah, I'm definitely looking forward to the day that we can all start seeing each other in 3D again. So, Sean,
we did come up with a unique thing for the office.
What's
that?
Go
ahead, Andy.
No, go ahead.
We did come up with a unique thing for the office. We've come up with these colored bracelets. So that when people come in, they choose a color of a bracelet, green, yellow, or red, depending on their comfort level with others, so that we can be respectful, and a little more empathic of each other, how each other are dealing with, the pandemic. Some people are at home taking care of elderly folks, and some people are not so concerned. So, we have rules just like everyone else. You have to wear your mask when you're walking around, and you have to sanitize and do all the things you're supposed to do to stave off the infection. But I think having the recognition of what your comfort level has been, pretty powerful for the folks that are in the office.
Yeah. It is interesting trying to navigate people's comfort levels. Everybody's at a different spot, and sometimes that's just their own risk tolerance. Sometimes that's who they have back at home or what they have going on personally. But is there anything in terms of kind of the way that your leadership has changed, or your kind of typical week in terms of meetings or trying to stay connected? How have you tried to adapt to the new environment?
For sure. We're definitely, our CEO has definitely pushed us to communicate more with our people and interact more. So more frequent one-on-ones, more written communications as well in terms of status and where things are. I do feel like our team has become more engaged with the work that they're doing. And we've certainly become more thoughtful about how we're spending our time, right? So, like I said, if there's anything that's changed, it's just the frequency and the depth of the communication that we're making sure that we're putting out there in terms of the health of the business, the health of our accounts, things that are going on, making sure people have less to worry about because we know they have a lot of other things to worry about at home.
Yeah. Now, is there anything along the way that you weren't expecting that surprised you as you were making this transition or in the time since?
Yeah, I do. I think people are much more busy than they were before. And I didn't really expect that. Like I feel it, they feel it, they're communicating it. Like they feel like they have to be on the screen a lot, and they feel more busy. Like they're doing more and working more than they were before. And that frightens me a little. I want to make sure people have a good work-life balance. And that's definitely something that surprised me. I didn't expect people to feel like they have to work more. But they are. They certainly are feeling that way. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, absolutely. That was one of the questions I'm going to save for when we kind of talk as a panel, because I think that kind of the balance and the well-being over the long term is a really important piece. But before we turn to Brian, I just wanted, I didn't know, were there any, sounds like those bracelets, work in the office. Is there been any other things that you've tried to do to translate the culture into a virtual environment?
Yeah, probably just the happy hours, the social interactions, the things that we're doing. We're using Teams as well, and we've transitioned to doing recognition in that sort of a environment. And I think that's been kind of fun. We're seeing a lot of activity there. Other than the stuff that Kim talked about, nothing that I think that's super unique that a lot of other companies aren't trying to do. But it's been good.
Great. All right. Well, with that, then I'm going to turn it over to Brian Bihl, who is the Director of Enabling Tools at Paylocity. He's been with Paylocity for 8 years and previously spent 6 years at Paychex. His specialty is his ability to work with people to achieve their goals. At his core, he's a communicator and active listener with the ability to quickly analyze and assess a situation, understand needs, utilize resources, and work to diplomatically present solutions. He has successfully led many implementations within a specific product level and moved into a broader implementation role with implementing tools across the organization, such as CRM, project management, and knowledge management, with a future focus on deeper analytics. Brian, thanks so much for joining us today.
Thanks for having me.
So, Brian, I know for you, maybe it was a little bit less of a change. Paylocity, similarly has been recognized as a top workplace, for their culture. But for the most part, it's always been in a virtual environment. So, tell us a little bit about how your organization is structured, and then did anything change for you all when March hit?
Yeah, I think so. Having around 3,500 employees, right off the bat, about half of us were already remote, across the country to begin with. So we were somewhat used to, that type of environment. I think that the biggest change for us was our service organization. They, were the part of the business that were mainly, in the office, all the time. And getting them, moved to full virtual was definitely a pretty big lift, for, our IT organization. And it took us a few weeks, to get everybody, situated and comfortable, proper equipment, that they needed. Everybody did have, laptops, already, but, getting them home, making sure that, they were capable, of being able to work, something as simple as, reliable internet, was something maybe we all took for granted, for quite some time, there. And then, any additional equipment we could get them to help them out, it was something that had to be really properly planned. We didn't have hundreds of extra monitors, lying around for folks that maybe wanted something in addition to just their laptop, out there. So our IT team had to really put together a pretty good plan of, sorting through, who needed what and to get it to them as soon as possible. So I think it was a pretty big challenge, for them, with that amount of people, going full, remote out there. I think they did a fantastic job though, and making sure everybody, was comfortable and set up and, able to keep working, for us.
Yeah. So there was a little bit of a transition, but from your own perspective, having always worked from home, maybe your typical week didn't change quite as much. But what does your typical week look like? just in terms of leading a virtual team.
Yeah, a lot of this on Zoom. It was a lot of folks that hadn't had a ton of experience, with virtual meetings. This is Zoom I'm on probably 80% of the day, out there. So I think, folks getting used to that a little bit more. We really highly recommend, keeping your camera on, for Zoom meetings too. I know that sounds a lot easier said, than done, but with not being in the office with folks anymore, or people not used to being in the office and used to that face-to-face interaction, having your camera on is a good way to still, see people, kind of, keep ourselves humanized, a little bit, as we have meetings and we speak, with folks, and understanding that, even with your camera on and people seeing you, doors might open, in the background, small humans might, creep through a little bit there from time to time. But I think it's something everybody's, done a good job of getting used to and acclimating to.
Yeah, that's actually one of the things I hope that seeing people's, whether dogs or kids or whatever in the background, it humanizes us a little bit, and hopefully we can keep that kind of thing in mind when you see somebody in their home as we're going into whatever the future looks like, that some of those things are just now recognizing a little bit that this person is a real human being. Is there anything though, because you all certainly have a little bit more practice at building culture virtually, other than it sounds like some of the virtual happy hours and things like that some organizations have been trying out. Are there any ways that you all, when you're used to just knowing someone virtually? I mean, there's probably people that you've led that you rarely, if ever, get to see in person. So what kinds of ways have you tried to build culture and in relationships in a virtual environment?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's some of the basics. I know Sean was mentioning like one-on-ones, and using avenues like Teams. We also have a product within our space called Community, that is kind of more of like an online form as well, where I think our company has many different categories of communities out there, from sports to home brewing, as Kim mentioned something about that before, where it's just trying to keep the interaction with folks up, and that those types of meetings, like one-on-ones, team meetings, are that much more important now, I think, than ever before, so that you can keep communication going with your organization, with individuals. Those meetings always seem to be the easiest ones to reschedule or push off to the next month out there. I think having those regularly, making sure that your employees feel like as management, those are just as important to you as they are to them, keeps them kind of connected with yourself and with the team, as we all are at home in front of our computers.
Yeah, perfect. Well, that actually leads me right into a question that I kind of wanted to pose to the whole panel, is really being intentional about those types of one-on-one meetings or whatever they are, because I think that when you no longer are going out to lunch with people in the office, or just seeing them as you're walking in, or at the water cooler, or in the office kitchen, building relationships and being intentional about it has to be a real focus. So has there been among any of you any ways that you're really trying to keep those employees able to build and maintain relationships without some of those informal conversations?
We started lunches, like virtual lunches. I have to say that they were well attended the first 2 times, and then it kind of dropped off. And it wasn't one-on-one. It was we just threw an invite out there, and if you could pop in, it would be like showing up in the kitchen and sitting down and having lunch with a coworker. So we did try that. And as I mentioned, we do sort of one-on-ones from a management perspective. But when we're onboarding new employees, and we have brought a couple of team members on in this environment, we do a virtual lunch with them. And then as a leadership team, we try to reach out on their first day and stay connected. And then we encourage their team members to make specific connections with them, because I do worry about those folks who've never walked the halls of Dixon Schwabl before, because there's a specific energy here and you feel it the second you cross the threshold. And so how do we replicate that virtually? So I think that's a work in progress, to be honest with you, but we're trying some things out.
Yeah, that's a great point. It's something I've heard quite a bit, actually, is, sometimes lunch now is your only time away from the computer. So, sometimes people may, as you were talking about, some of it maybe dropping off a little bit. Sometimes people want to get outside or whatever, but I think a lot of this is going to be a little bit of trial and error. Anybody else?
I mean, I think to echo a little bit, with what Kim there, had said. I mean, it's important, I think, for our leadership group, to keep that openness with our business. I mean, our executive team has a weekly call on Friday, open call, with the organization, where they're making themselves visible more so than they ever have to the organization, and it's a very open, Q&A. They usually do lead off, a little bit, with an update, on how things are going, with the business, keep people connected that way. But then, throughout the week, they've taken questions or on the fly, in the meeting too. And I think that's a great way to have the business still feel connected and understand like where we're going, as a business also, as we're obviously in some pretty uncharted, times right now. And I think that makes people feel a little bit more comfortable. We do the same with the virtual happy hours, also out there. We've also started a multitude of ERGs, employee resource groups out there, and have them, based on specific topics. One of them is, remote, work life, out there specific to that. And there's others, based upon either certain interests or, anything that's happening, out in the world today, and trying to think of different ways to continue to keep people engaged with one another. I mean, that's obviously the ultimate challenge, right now, with the times we're in.
Yeah, for us, to pair both of these folks, we've had a policy of like open doors for all the leadership, and our CEO has held open office hours, and we've done that at all levels of management, especially when issues arise that we're worried about, rippling through the culture. We proactively try to address that through open communication to the greatest degree possible. It's important.
So one of the questions that I wanted to ask, and Jody also asked it in the chat, was more around just like balance and well-being. I think that when you're working from home, the lines between home and work are as blurred as ever. So are there any ways that you all personally are finding, in your own schedules to find a little bit more balance, or any ways that you're able to help some of your team find balance? And then Jody, adds in as well with so much unknown coming with schools and for those with kids, ways to be flexible. So in terms of the balance, the well-being, and the family life, what kinds of policies are you either doing or trying or experimenting with?
I think the biggest thing on our side is first to ensure that people feel comfortable being very open about their situations. And, everybody individually is in their own unique situation right now. Whether you have children, you don't have children, everybody's being affected by this in some way. And, I know, within my specific team, we talk about it a lot. And I know, in some of those leadership meetings we talked about too, is talked about a lot also, and I think having those open communications and making sure people feel comfortable sharing like their experiences is very important. And I think we're about to enter another unique situation also. We've talked a lot at the leadership level lately about, a lot of schools, are going to be opening up. And on the surface, that seems like it could be a sense of relief, for most. But at the same time, we also have to prepare for, anything to happen, where we're right back to where we were in March, again. Not saying we want that to happen, obviously, but we have to, at least discuss the reality of that, and making sure everybody, understands, any sort of plan that they have, or, sharing, the situation that they're in, so that everybody's a bit more aware, of what, each individual is, having to deal with, or, working different hours or anything like that, as they, kind of navigate, through what we're going through right now.
Yeah, I think at the heart of a good culture, and we learned this from the Great Place to Work Institute, which is the agency that certifies the top places to work, that at the core of a great culture is trust, or high trust organizations. And so to Brian's point, if you're not starting from there, if you don't have mutual trust between employees and their leadership to be able to talk about the things that are stressing you out or bugging you, it's kind of hard to find a place or a pathway to go. But when you have that trust, you can look at the employees, at least in our industry, since it's service oriented, we try to abide by the judge me on my results, not the time that I'm sitting at my desk. But to Sean's point, people feel like they need to be at their desks all the time. I think it's a matter of having space to break away, because it's just there. There's no commute home. There's no commute to work. You know, you're walking down the stairs or walking over one room and sitting at your laptop. So we've tried to be very intentional about offering guidelines and get that they know they have freedom and the flexibility. We're really concerned about our families with young children and school-age children. We're concerned about the people who have folks with compromised immune systems in their home, or who are taking care of the elderly. You know, Brian mentioned it. It's not just the parents, and they're going to take a huge load on, but it's all employees. And so I think if you trust them and you know they're going to get their work done, and your productivity levels are high, then kind of what's the problem? Let people figure out their days the way that they need to, so that they're not carrying that stress into work.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree with all of those things. I think we haven't issued any policies around it, to answer your question directly, but I think we have an unspoken policy of take care of yourself, take care of your family. That family's first. You know, these are important things for any business to embrace. The business will wait, at least in our world. You know, no one's going to die if a pixel doesn't get moved around. So we're not in the medical field. So, you know, put your family first, make sure you're taking care of things, and then the work, you can get the work done when you have the time to get the work done, and just make sure you're doing the best possible work that you can. You're taking care of your customer, you're taking care of your teams, take care of each other, and that you're learning and growing too. I think that's another thing I'm worried about with my teams. We get so busy and we're so embedded in the work that people aren't taking it enough. And this is anecdotal, I don't have any data to support this, but they're not taking enough time for their own personal growth. And I believe that that's a really important part of your work life and business, is to make sure that everybody's growing and learning along the way. So that's probably going to be my next big push.
Yeah, that's actually something that I've been thinking quite a bit about. You know, I think in some ways, you know, many of you were able to transition without too much frustration or anything, you know, just in terms of to getting the work done. But then how do we rebuild the relationships and the personal growth and things like that? So that was actually another question that came up in the Q&A around a little bit around employee recognition and some of those things. So have there been any creative ways that you try to recognize employees or do some of those things in a virtual environment?
I can give a shout for Paylocity here, because we're a Paylocity customer, but they have a area of the service that we buy into called impressions. And so on a regular basis, we have an agency meeting that would happen in the building every Wednesday at 8:30. And so now we do it virtually, and we have from the jump with the pandemic. And we intentionally read the impressions that people are getting from their team members. So an impression is kind of like a high five, and add a girl, add a boy for employees who are doing good things for one another at work. And we make a point to pick out a handful of them and read them every Wednesday, just to keep people going, keep the energy going. And it's a really great culture connector too.
Yeah, we've been using Teams. I mentioned it in the chat. Before that, we were using Potential Point, which was a Rochester-based company. But we've transitioned to Teams, and they've got a recognition plugin that you can use. And it's very cool, because when the recognitions get posted, everybody in the company sees them right in Teams. And, you know, you get lots of feedback like right away, people liking it, commenting on it, sharing it. And then we do the same thing in our all staff. We take a few to promote in the all staff to give people some public recognition for the great work that they do, and the great culture that we're building together. We try to share that stuff around. We use it in our yearbooks. At the end of the year, we produce a yearbook for all the work that we've done and all the projects that we completed. You probably see a couple of them on my desk at the bottom there. So, you know, we try to do things to promote all the great work and give people recognition. I think we're amplifying that for sure, and trying to get a little more of that going, and getting people engaged a little bit more in that, department by department. It's important.
Yeah, I mean, we're right in line with Kim there. You know, obviously we we call it drinking our own wine, you know, as we use our own, you know, products in there. But yeah, I mean, the impressions is a great way, you know, to be able to recognize people. You know, I make it a habit, if, you know, an employee of mine is recognized, you know, I'll take that email that I get, you know, as the immediate, manager, you know, over that employee, and I'll maybe socialize it, you know, a little bit more, you know, amongst my, senior leadership group. So they're, getting a little bit of knowledge on that also, but, certainly within team meetings, we call that type of stuff out, also, and making sure that people, are understanding what people, other people are getting recognized for, inside the business.
Brian, while you're there, Bob had a question that I know you answered in the chat, but there might be some other people that are curious about it. Just kind of what your typical, as a much larger organization, what your typical kind of meeting structure looks like. As Bob mentions, ITX and Dixon Schwabl could probably, small enough to have some an all hands meeting, whereas not necessarily the case for Paylocity. So tell us a little bit about kind of your management structure in your meetings.
Yeah, no, definitely. So I mentioned earlier, how we do have a weekly, exec, Q&A out there. That it is an all hands on deck, very similar, format to this, where everyone is muted, and can ask questions, either before, the meeting, that are gathered up, or during the meeting also. But we've also increased the frequency, of our senior leadership, group, which is kind of a director and up, meeting where, previously we maybe had those like once a quarter. We're having those monthly, now, and it's really to ensure that, we're, aligned, as a leadership group, and any messages we're trying to get out, trying to share, with our individual, parts of the organization, is consistent, right? I mean, the last thing you want, is for, across a large business is different messages being sent out, about whatever, and so the frequency of that, has increased. And then even inside certain parts of the organization, smaller pockets of leadership meetings have increased a little bit also. So it's the volume of that, is higher, that it once was. You talked about, not seeing everybody in the office or cooler talk, as often as we are, so that, we've been doing that a little bit more just to keep, consistent messages, out there for our business.
Thanks. Now, I'm curious as well, again, as we go from kind of the survival mode to figuring out, what this is going to look like over the medium to long term, I'd be really curious, from your perspective, has anyone done any well, obviously Paylocity has, but any virtual hiring and onboarding, and how do you make employees feel included in, in the culture in a virtual way?
I'd like to answer that. So we have done quite a bit of hiring virtually during the pandemic here. And I think my team has thought very purposefully about this. How do we get people to feel as though, they're a part of the team quickly? And one of the ways we're doing it is we're making personal phone calls. So just pick up the phone and call them, not on a scheduled time, and say, hey, I heard you're joining. Welcome to the team. Sending out a LinkedIn note with, some very nice comments. So we're encouraging our team to actually reach out beyond the formal routes to actually meet with these people or meet these people and learn a little bit more about them. At least that's something I've been doing and encouraging my team to do.
Yeah, and I mentioned that we've onboarded a couple of team members too, and so we have departmental or team lunches with them as soon as they start. The leadership team makes outreach immediately, and we also, this is something that we were doing pre-pandemic, but that we've carried through at our all-staff meeting. We have a questionnaire that we have them fill out, and then we read it live, which we don't tell them that we're going to read it live. So there's a little bit of hazing involved too, because there's some fun questions in there, and they don't know that the entire company is going to hear their answers. So that just brings a little levity to the day as well. But those are some things we're doing.
Yeah, I think for us, so there's a lot of hiring virtually. Also, I think, that first week is really important. I feel, anytime you start a new job, I feel anyone is nervous, and a little, uneasy about, stepping into something, brand new, out there. So that first week, there's a really big emphasis on, communicating and being very open about, who we are as a company and what we're trying to accomplish out there, and that involves, whatever position, is being onboarded there, that the leadership group is extremely present, and also extremely vocal, during, that first week of onboarding. I've been in a couple sessions, where, even the executive group will come in, over a group, kind of give, their backstory a little bit, make them feel a bit more, human to the folks, coming in, and then continuing to be present, throughout the onboarding, experience. Obviously can't be there all the time, but, making themselves visible is very important, so that they try to make those employees feel as comfortable as possible coming in, and then, the frequency, of meetings, like within the team and one-on-one. I've talked about that, but we've increased that a lot, over the course of the past few months. Really allowing someone new, to kind of introduce themselves, share their story a little bit, and have people relate to that, is really important with helping people feel comfortable, upon starting up, also. So it's definitely been a challenge, not being able to see people face to face. I've had employees before that, it's been months before I've actually met them in person. So that, keeping the frequency of meetings, up with them, making yourself visible, on meetings like this, on camera and in Zoom, tries to give them as much comfort as possible, when they get going.
Yeah, Brian, Kevin's actually asking as well. His company is now thinking about starting a work from anywhere initiative, and they're trying to navigate the, allowing employees to work from other states, logistics and engagement. Do you have any suggestions or resources or tips of kind of launching something like that?
Yeah, no. My team that I have, spread all across the country out there in different states. I think, the challenge from working in any states right off the bat is actually getting everybody, somewhat aligned on a schedule, right? I have an employee that's on the West Coast, or there's a challenge there when it comes to scheduling meetings and making sure that, I'm not getting them out of bed, in the morning, or, they're not scheduling time with me when I'm trying to put the kids to bed, at night, because of the difference, like that. I think, it's putting an understanding out there and getting on the same page, of availability, setting the right expectations, like with your employees, also, that could be, roaming a bit, out there, and then the importance of those one-on-ones and reinforcing those expectations is going to be really important. You want them to be flexible. You want them to feel comfortable being able to work, where they need to in order to get the job done. And as long as you're aligned on what those expectations are, and as management, you're communicating those appropriately, and you're on the same page with your employees, they what they need to accomplish. Then they understand what your expectations are, and what you're looking for, from them.
Great, thanks. So Bob had a question in the chat about those domestic interruptions, he called them, that we were talking about earlier, and Sean wanted to handle that a little bit, and then if the other panelists want to jump in, they can as well.
Yeah, I think Kim talked about it a little bit earlier. I think it's an honor to have access to people's homes and their lives. And I think when there's a domestic, like a dog that runs into the room, and I mean, who doesn't smile when you see a dog? Come on, there's gotta be something wrong with you, right? Or a child peeks his head in the door. I think it's an honor, and we're real humans, and this, like Kim said, we get to experience their real lives a little bit. I think it improves our empathy level, and we should be open to it and understanding of it. And I'm fortunate enough to have most of my kids grown. My youngest is 15 now, so I don't have to deal with a lot of that stuff, but I find it to be an honor. So
I love that word for it. That's a perfect word to nail how it feels. Honor. It's an honor. I know when I've been in meetings and a team member's child has opened the door and dove on their lap, and they're kind of shoving them aside, I always say, no, hi Al, come on in, what are you doing, what are you coloring? Try to engage with the child so that the employees feel comfortable, because I think that's your first reaction.
Yeah.
Is I'm working, my kid's not supposed to be here. So I think you have to work deliberately to make people feel comfortable to allow those disruptions.
Yeah, it's funny. It's kind of one of those things where when it happens to us, we're like, oh no. But then when you see it happen for somebody else, you're like, oh, isn't that sweet?
Fine, yeah, please.
Exactly.
Yeah. It's about embracing it. I think has probably seen the video. I think it was the newscaster, that, their kids like all of a sudden, like, shot into the room, running, and you could tell how uncomfortable, he felt like right off the bat, so, embracing it, is something, that, I think, everybody's done a pretty good job of, here, and as Kim mentioned, I mean, asking like, oh, who is that? That's your dog. What's their name? Hey, that's your child. What's their name? So that, the next time that you see them, because you're probably going to see them again, you have that knowledge, and, you make your people feel comfortable about it. And I think, if you're embracing that, that's going to open up more people, to do that. And, it's one of those things now that, as everybody says, it's the new norm. It's going to happen, and it's going to happen again. And I think if everybody is, open to it, and, embracing the fact that, they get to meet, more of somebody's family, or, their pets or anything like that, it's great. It's going to happen. So, I enjoy it. At this point, and it's a great conversation piece, for folks also.
Yeah, you used to only get to see the static pictures that they had on their desks of their family, and now you get to see the moving ones, and maybe even talk to them too. Bob actually had an interesting question about meetings. I think there's always that temptation, certainly, of your emails flying through, and you're on your computer anyways, and he wondered if there was any best practices, or how you kind of felt about those that are checking in and out of meetings, in terms of maybe they report on what they need to, and then they're doing some email over in the background. Are there any expectations? Is that a no-no? What kinds of things do you all do in terms of your meetings and your expectations there?
Well, I think it would be my response. I wrote it in the Q&A section there. I think it's impossible for you to dictate that people can't be on their email or doing other things. That would just be a mistake. Because reality is reality. We are naturally all to some degree on a scale of ADHD. We all have it. And it's just not human to not be. If it's one-to-one, that's a problem. Like if you're having one-on-one and you're also doing your email and you're doing something else, then that can be a real problem. But I encourage my people to push back on meetings that they don't need to be in, or if they only need to be in part of the meeting, to take back their time, because your time, I believe, is your most valuable asset, and that's what we're paying you for. That's what you're here for your time. So defend it and push back on meetings where information in an email or in some sort of a status report, versus having to defend it in a meeting, or be in a meeting for an hour that you only need to be part of for 10 minutes. I mean, we're trying to make that a part of our culture to push back on those sorts of time requirements.
I think now more than ever, agendas for meetings are important. I've heard a lot of folks, that aren't used to being on virtual meetings a lot, come in and say, oh, everybody's just talking over each other. It's very hard, to get things accomplished, out there. I think, by having, set agendas, for meetings, around who's speaking when, try to, nominate a bit of a moderator, for that, whether that's the person that scheduled the meeting, or, calling that out at the beginning of the meeting, I think is extremely beneficial, for folks. So then, as John was saying, hey, if I'm part of this 10 minutes of the meeting, that's an hour long, maybe I pop in, for that, contribute, what I need to, and then I can pop right out. We're very open to that, here also. But agendas have helped immensely, with making sure that, we're getting through the meeting, and people are spending the appropriate time they need to in there.
Yeah, I agree with everything that's been said. I think the meeting journey's been interesting through this for us, because in the beginning, we were kind of all celebrating, oh my gosh, we don't need 30-minute meetings. We don't need an hour meeting. We're getting meetings done in like 20 minutes and we get our time back. And then all of a sudden more meetings came on to fill the time of those meetings that were not an hour anymore. And now we're over meeting and we're inviting too many people to meetings. And so I think shifting the culture around meetings and being deliberate about that is sort of the next phase of this, at least for us. I don't know if it'll go so far as to have us develop a meeting policy, but we might need to, just to provide guidelines for people. So that was great advice with the agenda, Brian. Thanks.
I think one last thing too that we've done also recently, around meetings is now, especially being home. And I think somebody asked me a question earlier about, how do you handle the back to back, and the fact that maybe you have kids at home or you have like a responsibility at home, to take care of. We've really instituted a lot of 45-minute meetings lately, where, normally it's an hour block. Let's schedule it for 45 minutes. That way, and stick to that, obviously, is the most important part, of it, where you do give yourself maybe the ability to come up for air, for a minute, for a few minutes before maybe your next meeting starts out there, or take an hour meeting and make it a half hour, meeting also, or take a 30-minute meeting and make it a 15-minute meeting. Anything like that, to give yourself a little bit of time, throughout the course of the day is extremely beneficial.
Another question that Jody posed that I wanted to pose to the panel, may or may not be directly related to creating a virtual team, but I think it is definitely, in addition to this virtual environment, probably the other main thing that companies are really focused on right now, and rightfully so. Just Jody was curious from the panel on the diversity, inclusion, equity strategies, practices, the movement that's going on since the murder of George Floyd and many other things that have sadly continued since then, definitely brought that to the forefront of many businesses and made it a more, I think it's always been a priority, but making it a more urgent priority has certainly been top of mind for many companies. So are there anything you all are doing, and has the virtual environment, I guess, changed it, or is there anything else to be thinking about from that perspective?
Well, we've always sort of had, sorry, Kim, I'll give you a second. We've always had open, like our hiring policies. Our CEO and VP of HR have been, I think, incredible at making sure that our hiring policies ensure that we have open access, and we're trying to be as diverse and inclusive as possible in all of that. It's important to us. I think it's important to all of us. It's important for our society. So I don't think anything for us has changed in that regard. But we did decide to make a pretty big contribution in Measures for Justice. If you guys are familiar with those guys and what they're doing here in Rochester, an incredible organization that's trying to bring data transparency to the criminal justice system. And it's not for profit. So a plug for them. If anybody, you can go to their website and donate and help them out in any way that you can. But they're using software and data and systems to really improve the transparency of the criminal justice system. I think that doing that alone will help us make tremendous strides, in the equality movement.
Yeah, I think for us it forced a deep examination. We were making strides and what I think we would have deemed as progress, but after the murder of George Floyd and the activity that ensued after that, we really stopped, and we made a very deliberate decision to listen to our team. And so we started hosting private listening sessions virtually, voluntary, and just kind of understanding what people were feeling, where they were at, and then taking a really hard look at ourselves and understanding what we needed to do as an organization to start to really have an impact and make a difference, but do it in a way that was going to be actionable and not just words. So some of the things that were born from that is we launched our, and so we amped up the DEI initiatives around that. We've formed an external panel of folks that we ask to review our work before it goes live so that we can make sure that it's inclusive. And then we're examining our hiring practices and our hiring policies. And then we've started a series of workshops called Black Businesses Matter, which will launch next month, where we're offering small business advice and support through these virtual workshops. So a few very small steps in progress forward, a long way to go, but those are some things that we've instituted.
And for us, I talked a little bit about some of those employee resource groups, that we've started before, the ERGs. We've set them a few up specific, to certain topics, out there, whether it's, the Black Lives Matter movement or anything else like that. Being a larger organization, I think Paylocity recognized, that with being a larger organization that, kind of results, being a more diverse, organization. We actually just recently hired a chief diversity officer, into the business, as we understand that, yes, maybe small steps have been taken, internally here, as a business, that's, maybe just a start, and not enough, for right now, and that, we need to include, or we need to continue, to have conversations and ensure that, our, employees feel comfortable, with what we're doing as a business, the messages we're sending as a business, out there, and continue to have, those conversations as we go forward.
Thanks. And yeah, Jody actually adds in the chat that there's some resources available, including a plug for the Rochester chapter of the National Association of African American Human Resource Professionals, who's been holding town hall meetings that have been great forums for HR professionals to share both their best-in-class strategies and practices, as well as some of the challenges that they're facing. So another thing worth checking out. I also wanted to highlight a question from Regina Bailey. Kim, you mentioned earlier that you had conducted an employee survey pretty early on to see where people were and how they were feeling. Have any of you been conducting employee surveys regularly since, both to kind of see where people are, but also maybe even just to get ideas or suggestions based on their feedback for how to build culture in this virtual environment?
Yep, so I'll just give a little bit more on our survey. So the first one we sent was a mix of understanding how people were doing at home. Again, sort of a mental health, professional health check. Do you have what you need? Do you feel comfortable? And then also starting to get a gauge for what their comfort level was with the future of working from home versus return to work. So that sort of set this baseline understanding of people's fear factor, because that's really what it was in the beginning. It was strong fear. I'm not at all comfortable until either we don't have a virus or we have a vaccine, or you can make me 100% certain that I'm not going to get sick at work, which is what we expected to hear. And so then that kind of informed us as we started to build our return to work plan, again, very arbitrarily, not knowing what the pandemic was going to do from a trajectory perspective. But we then did a second survey and got some deeper knowledge around that about 6 weeks later. And that really did inform the policies that we've put in place about return to work, which is we started back in the office this past Monday, but it's completely voluntary. As Sean had said, there's nobody that's going to be made to feel obligated to come into the office until they're 100% ready. So we'll continue to just sort of follow their lead and let the people drive this.
We haven't done any surveys. Like, we've done a couple surveys, but nothing that's been that impactful or that direct. So
we've done a few. I think some of them, like right at the beginning, it was actually kind of focused on, as I mentioned, like our service organization. It was the one organization that I think that our business was probably most nervous about, moving completely virtual. So there was a survey that was sent out to them, about what they're struggling with, with going virtual, so that we can turn that into, kind of an education seminar, for them, and then bring in people, that have been virtual to help them out, a little bit, within that seminar. And then there was recently one, sent out about, going back to school, and how, parents were having to, adapt to that. So again, I think they're going to be coming out pretty soon here with another seminar internally around just helping in giving advice, to parents, knowing that, either their kids are still home with them, full time, half the time, if they're going to be, going full time and then maybe having to come back, home again, just helping prepare, people and as much knowledge as possible, and share experiences too, so that people, can get, any knowledge they can, to help them out.
Great. Well, somehow we've only got a few minutes left. The time's been flying by. We've had a really active discussion, and so I appreciate that and appreciate all the questions coming in. I think maybe a good way to start to wrap up. I'd just be curious from each of you, as you're looking to the future, what have you learned? What kinds of things from this experience are you going to take forward? Even if whatever virtual, whatever normal looks like, will there be more flexibility, in the future? Have you started to think about what does it look like, as we move forward, and what have we learned along the way that we might want to keep, even when we don't have some of these same restrictions?
Yeah, well, I think I'd like to figure out a way to keep the family interaction and the sort of camaraderie around figuring out how to make things work. I mean, there's been a lot of positive impacts on the culture as well. It's not all negative. So I think we got to tease those out, figure out what they are, and determine ways in which we can keep that energy going. Keep the momentum.
Do you think there will be more flexibility, or are you, in terms of working from home, or did you have any kind of work from home flexibility or policies before?
Well, we always did. I mean, most of our folks have had the ability to work from wherever. It's not, and they often go to client sites. So, we don't really know where they are or pay much attention to where they actually sit. It's going to cause us to question how much space do we really need. I think that's going to be a common thing for lots of businesses. If people truly have and feel as though they have the full flexibility, will they come back to work? Because, like I said, they can now. Now, obviously, we have the pandemic going on, so there's lots of other reasons why they're not coming in. But when all is said and done, it will be a different environment, and I think we'll have learned a lot, and we'll be better for it.
I agree. I think flexibility is the thing that will be the biggest change factor here, and not only flexibility in terms of work environment or work day, but flexibility on hiring practices, the availability, which we've always had the availability to access talent everywhere, but opening our minds to the fact that we could have talent work remotely, which we've done in the past, but it's always been an employee who started with us that's moved to a different market, or when we've had satellite offices. So just opening our minds a little bit there and thinking about what that could look like are some of the things that I think will be different for us.
Yeah, and I think what we've probably learned the most is actually how amazingly resilient so many people are.
Right.
When it comes, to this situation, as I mentioned earlier, I mean, everybody's going through it in a different way. There are similarities, of course, between folks and stuff, but I think we've always had the mindset, I think, in our organization that certain components of our organization, had to be, in an office. And I think we've learned that that's not the case, anymore. And that, our people, are, fully capable of being remote and still getting, a very quality job, done. I think, it's also, I think, been a really good, practice for, the management within our organization too, of, understanding how important those connections are, either at a team level or an individual level, with their employees, and that the consistency, of those, and the importance, in that, you definitely lose sight, a lot of that, I think, with being in an office a bit more and thinking, oh, I'll stop by their desk, or, oh, they'll stop by my office. You don't have that, anymore, being fully remote. And so those types of one-on-ones and team meetings are that much more important. But, our staff has been, extremely resilient, through this. And I think it's definitely opened up our eyes, that, a remote workforce is something that we can actually expand upon, more so than we've had, before. And it's definitely, changing our minds into thinking how things will look, going forward, as, I think we're still in a period of uncertainty, and how, looking forward would be. So resiliency is definitely the biggest thing that stuck out to me.
Yes, a lot of uncertainty indeed, and I think we're going to find out a lot over the next month or so in terms of kids going back to school and in colleges and everything like that. So probably a lot of flexibility yet to come. But Brian, Kim, Sean, thanks so much for joining us today and really showing proof positive that your organizations are able to build a conscious culture even in a virtual environment, even if it requires a lot of flexibility and it's probably still always in flux. And a lot still to be learned. So maybe we'll have to do a follow-up panel, because this was one of the best attended and most engaging panels that we've had, and we really appreciate all of your feedback and as audience members, all the great questions and answers that were going on. We will be this was recorded, so we will be posting it to our Conscious Capitalism YouTube channel. So if you missed anything or you want to share it with anybody, you can certainly do it there. It'll also be posted as a podcast if you just would like to listen to the audio version. But if you are a first time or not on our mailing list, you can go to consciouscapitalismroc.org, and basically just every month we'll be having a panel like this, probably virtually for the foreseeable future. But on any number of topics, you can certainly reach out to me directly or on that page if there's any specific topics that you'd really like to hear about. We're always open to hearing what those are. Thank you so much to our panelists and to everyone who joined us today. Hope you have a great rest of your day and hope to see you again soon.
Thanks, everyone. Take care.
Thanks for having us, Andrew.
Bye, everybody.